Well, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever it is that you happen to be this today as you're joining us for day two of NASBE's 2020 virtual conference. We're so pleased to have you back for day two, if you were here with us yesterday. And if not, welcome to your first experience with our virtual conference. We were really encouraged by yesterday. Thank you so much for engaging the way you did. And we want to start today off with engagement, very first thing. Just a reminder that on the screen that you're seeing on the Hoover app, there is a Q&A tab and there is a discussion tab, a chat tab. And if you have questions for any of the presenters as we're going through today, please put them in the Q&A box. Those are questions for the presenters. If you're talking among yourselves, please use the chat box. I'm going to ask you right now to use the chat box. If you were with us yesterday, I'd like for you to take the opportunity in the chat box to share with us very shortly, either in a single word, a short phrase, or a simple sentence, one of your takeaways from yesterday. Maybe it was an aha that you had. Maybe it was one thing that you really learned. Maybe it was just a takeaway of something you want to do. So I encourage you now in the chat box, if you want to put your name, your state, and then put whatever it is that you'd like to share from yesterday. Keep it short. Keep it simple, either a single word, short phrase, or a simple sentence of an aha, a takeaway, or something you learned yesterday. And while you're doing that, let me go ahead here and, as I said, thank you for engaging in day one. I was so encouraged as I looked at some of the involvement and engagement that's happening here on the Hoover app. Lots of involvement in the community discussions, lots of meetups, lots of great discussions. I really am enjoying the pictures that people are posting from your state. And your topics there: football, there's baseball, there's state board check-ins. There's lots of really great things happening. But I would note that there are additional functions if you want to use the app on your phone. Some of the pictures that are being shared are not available on the desktop app, but they are available on the phone app. So just know if you put some pictures in there and you can't see them on the desktop, they are visible on the phone app. So um, you have dueling apps there, ever how they work. Also, thank you for your patience on our day one Who've experience. It's all new to us. We are learning together, and Dr. Ernest, you'll hear from in a few minutes. He made the comments that we're all learning together separately, and so thank you for that. We've made some tweaks to today's operation in response to perhaps some of the issues we had yesterday, but overall, we think it went well, and thank you for that. Just a couple quick reminders that if you have difficulty with your technicalities, then you need to go to the Ask the Organizers tab and ask the organizers, and we'll have people there to help you figure that out. Also invite you to go to our sponsor pages and thank them for their funding, thank them for their support for our conference. Also, there are lots of great resources being shared in the sessions, and you can see those. But remember that what you're seeing, you'll have access to later as well, because all these sessions are being recorded. And once we get them all packaged together, we will send you a link. And if you're a registered attendee here, you'll have access to them for quite a time left. Now, I'm going to share my screen so you won't have to look at my face and talk to you just about a couple quick things. First of all, who's in the Zoom? Who is here? Some folks asked me yesterday, they said, we don't really know who else at the conference. We can't see them face to face. Well, if you look at the map there, all of those states that are in the dark green are in the room. Those are folks who states that have representatives here at NASBE 2020 virtual conference. We're really pleased to report that we have 237 registrants from 34 states. And that's a really good number for us. State boards are kind of a small group. There are only a handful of state board members in the whole country. So we thank you for that. And also a reminder that if you're inclined to do so, you're welcome to tweet or using the hashtag NASBE20. Lots and lots of activity on Twitter yesterday. And thank you. That really helped a great deal. Now, a couple special thanks. Special thanks to our board of directors who you see listed here. The executive committee are those that are in the italicized font at the top. Then we have the area directors who we will be highlighting separately in just a few moments. Also on your board of directors, you have two members who serve as new member representatives. And in case you're not aware, we have two affiliate organizations. One who represents the state board execs, that's our NASBE organization, and on the board of directors is their president, as well as Nicosia, which is the state attorney's organization. They're both affiliates of NASBE. Also, a really special thanks to the NASBE conference planning team. These are the folks here on the right that took your input from the survey that you completed and designed the content that you're seeing today. And I must shout out a very special thanks to the NASBE team staff. These are the folks that are behind the scenes making this happen. These are the folks that work for you every single day of the year, that they are there to help you. And in just a moment, you're going to see how their liaison connects to your state. But these are the folks that work for NASBE. If you look at all the work that comes out of our office, all the publications, the webinars, the conferences, are all done by 8 people, and these are the ones that then these are they. So thank you, staff, for making it happen, and for being such a great support team. Also, today, you are going to have a couple of opportunities for interaction. We have a break and networking opportunity for you. If you want to get together with other attendees just to have a conversation at this afternoon's break from 3:30 to 4, and then again this evening after the conference starting at 5:15, if you go to the link that is on that item on your agenda, click on the agenda item, go to that link, then you'll be in an open social room where you'll be able to chat with your fellow members. I'd like to also remind you of some very important uh, activities for tomorrow. As you know, NASBE is divided state boards of education into 4 areas, and we have the areas listed there on your screen. We meet by region tomorrow. Those 4 regions will meet at separate times. During these meetings, you'll have the opportunity to interact with those people who are in your region. You'll be getting data about the state board interactions in that region. You can learn a lot more about your neighboring states, or even some stuff maybe about your own state you didn't know. And these are all staggered times tomorrow so that staff and some of the board members can participate in all of these events. So notice that the times I've listed are all Eastern times. You have to make the adjustment for yourself to your own time zone. But we begin at 9:30 a.m. Eastern with the southern area. Then we have the northeastern area, then the central area, and the western area. And you will be in a Zoom room like this with everyone. And also, in addition to looking at some of the data around the region and those type things, it's also where a little bit of business is handled. It's where you will hear we have 2 candidates running for chair-elect. They will both visit these meetings. They'll tell you a little bit about themselves, so that you'll know as a state how to cast your vote. Also, you will be electing somebody from your region to serve on the nominations committee for the next year. I highly encourage you to take advantage of these regional conference discussions. I think you'll find them really intriguing. And these are the folks who will be leading that work. I said earlier when I talked about the board of directors that I would highlight them separately. Well, here they are. If you look at the screen, and for each area, these are the directors from that region, as well as the staff liaison from NASBE who service that area. The central area, your area directors are Vic Lenz from Missouri and Christine Benson from Illinois. Now you ask, why do we have one in italics and one not? Next year, our board of directors is reducing its size a little bit as a result of board action a couple years ago. So the person in italics will carry on into 2021. The one that's not in italicized, that is plain font, will roll off the board this year. So those are your directors and those are your staff leads for the areas. Now, you may be new to NASBE or you may be new to your board and you think, well, what region am I in? Here they are. If you want to know where your home is and what your area is, here they are. So if you're in the central area, you see it listed. If you're in the southern area, northeastern, and western area, there you go. So anyway, I'll stop sharing my screen at this point and go back to the regular screen. And let's take a real quick romp through the agenda for today. In just a moment, we'll kick off our first general session, our plenary session, that's called Preparing Our Earliest Learners for a Lifetime of Success. That's the title of the session, but this is a historical event for us. We have every single year, we open our second day with the same keynote. That is the National Teacher of the Year. It's always the same position, different person. So we're really excited today to have our National Teacher of the Year with us. And this is what she'll be speaking about. Following the general session today, you have a choice of two concurrent sessions, and both of them carry on the theme that both our Teacher of the Year is going to be setting, but also the theme from yesterday. If you recall, we started yesterday with the whole idea of equity and excellence, and you saw that carry through the agenda. It carries through again today. Your two choices are shaping policy through a whole child lens or literacy instruction in an online environment. I'm really torn. I can't be in both, but I'm probably going to be toggling back and forth because these presenters are just top drawer. If you look at the whole child lens, I think you're really going to be impressed with Dr. Dreyer, who is the professor of pediatrics at NYU School of Medicine. Great presenter. But also on the literacy one, you can't get much better than Tim Shanahan and Nell Duke speaking. So there are no bad choices here for your concurrent. Then we'll have that longer break that I talked about that gives you a networking opportunity. And we close out the day with a final general session that I think you'll want to hear. It's called Elections in 2020, Governing in 2021. We'll have two really informed insider folks to help us look at what we project is going to happen after the election. What are the polls saying? What are some of the good tidbits we have for leading after the election? So I encourage you to stick around for that. And then again, we have that last networking opportunity at the end of the day. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our NASBE Board of Directors Chair-elect, who's going to give you a welcome and then introduce our keynote speaker. We're going to hear now from Dr. Byron Ernest. Many of you know Byron. You've met him, you've seen him in meetings, and if you were in the award ceremony last night, you heard him speak. Dr. Ernest is a member of the Indiana State Board of Education and has been since 2015. He has lots of in-depth experience in career and technical education, in running schools, in school leadership. And we're just so very pleased that he's going to be at the helm of the NASBE Board of Directors beginning tomorrow afternoon, because we have our delegate assembly and our business meeting tomorrow afternoon, and that's where we have the shift of the officers. So Dr. Ernest is going to come and speak to us now as the chair-elect, and in 24 hours from now, he'll be chair. So Dr. Ernest, thanks for being here. We appreciate it, and welcome to the podium.
Thank you, Robert. Wow, you just like sent chills when you said helm. I don't know whether to be scared or what at this point. Greetings, everyone, though. I love the fact that Robert said that he was toggling yesterday, because I was doing that too. And I would compare that to my wife gets very mad at me. I love to flip through the channels and keep flipping. So I was doing some of that yesterday, but it was because I wanted to hear some of everything that was going on. But I want to publicly thank you, Robert, for your service and the entire staff. I know you did that, but I want to as well, because this conference, and we've been getting lots of great comments in the chat boxes and things about the conference, and I think it's been wonderful, and the staff has just been awesome. And so a shout out to them. It's such an honor to be here and to serve as NASBE's chair-elect, and in 24 hours the chair. What a great start to the conference, though, and I want to point that out, because notice I did not say virtual. Our CEO Robert Hall reminds us rightly a lot that we should not look at things from a deficit mindset, but from an asset. And so therefore, it's day 2 of our conference. We just happen to be using the modality of the virtual world. And when I think about this being, it's day 2 of our conference, it's the day after the second game of the World Series, it's day 224 of the pandemic. Yeah, I'm weird, I keep track of that. And I want us to look at what we're now reimagining, not just pivoting. I've become a hater of that word pivot. How about we just reimagine what we're doing? I challenge you to think about all the great things that we've learned in the past 224 days since the WHO, which I thought was a rock group, and then figured out that it wasn't. This World Health Organization named this a global pandemic. Just think about how great this conference is with the speakers that are able to take part because of the modality that we're using. And I would argue that probably we maybe even are forming some relationships, deeper relationships that we might not have had the chance to before. And if you want to argue with me on that, go check out in the app all the different groups that have been set up. You know, we've got Big Ten football. Robert was talking smack in the Big Ten football earlier today. Of course, I just had to put in Purdue and just say that we worry about academics and that part instead of all the other things. We've got Q&As. We've got a World Series section, regional discussions, and all kinds of great things. So to me, we need to be looking at all the positive things that we're able to do and the things that we've learned. Also, I'm excited about the last thing I want to talk about here is I'm super excited about November the 5th, Thursday, November the 5th, is going to be our next NASBE office hours. As you know, that's something that got started during this 224 days. That's been a positive. And boy, our member engagement, the conversations that we've had, the things that we've learned from each other have been great through those. So we're going to have our next one on November the 5th. That's a Thursday, 3 p.m. And the whole time's going to be dedicated to some deeper conversations, more learning. You know, hey, we talked about this during the conference. Want to dig in a little deeper on that. And in fact, in the app, in the UVA app, there is a group, because I just started it a few minutes ago, that actually asks questions, and there's already 5 or 6 different topics in there. I asked for topics of what did you want to further talk about and dig in deeper on. So think about that. And that will be, just in case you were doing the math, that'll be day 237 of the pandemic. So think about all those positive things. And that's the light that I want us to think about. So now on to why you're really here and who we really want to hear. Tabatha Rosproy is the first early childhood educator to be named National Teacher of the Year. And I'm excited about that because Tabatha, as a former State Teacher of the Year in 2010, so 10 years ago, this is my 10-year anniversary, so to speak. But 10 years ago, I was the first one in the nation that was a State Teacher of the Year that was an ag science teacher. So I know what that feels like to be the first of a teaching, and I don't think there's been another one since. And so I don't know whether that's because there's just nobody out there as good. I don't know. That's just not. We won't go. Wow, you got me talking smack today with that Big Ten section that we've got going, but. She teaches preschool at Winfield Early Learning Center in Winfield, Kansas. And as school buildings began to close due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I like this, Tabatha, because you served as a co-chair of an educator task force that helped compile Kansas's continuing learning guidance, which is super important. And I would guess that you would say, and I hope you nod on this, that there's been a lot of great things learned in the last 224 days. Even though it was in bad circumstances, there's been some great things learned. And so as a former Teacher of the Year, I know what it takes to be doing the ambassador work that she's doing and the schedule that she's got. And I just want to say that it's an honor to introduce you. And I just appreciate the fact that you're holding true to our tradition of having the National Teacher of the Year speak to our group, and welcome. And I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ernest. I'm really excited to be here today. I am going to share my screen for a presentation that I've prepared real quick here. Okay, hopefully you can see that well. So, like Dr. Ernest said, I am Tabatha Rosproy, the 2020 National Teacher of the Year, and I am the first early childhood educator to be given this honor, which is an incredibly special feeling, and I'm really excited to further the work that early childhood professionals do in our communities. I began my career at a Head Start program in Salina, Kansas, fresh out of college. And just like Head Start is for kids, it was an incredible foundation for me. And that program there invested so much in my professional development that I will forever be thankful. So not only did I get to work with students there, but if you know about the Head Start model, they are very big on working with families. So that was the beginning of my passion work with families. So life did lead me back to the town I went to college in about 6 years ago, which is a rural town called Winfield in south central Kansas, and we're right on the Oklahoma border. We have about 12,000 people, and I teach for the public school system and the special services cooperative there. Something really unique and special about Winfield is that we fully fund preschool for every child, regardless of income or ability. So any 4-year-old can come to school for free. And I didn't know how uncommon that was until I began teaching. So our enrollment in our community of 4-year-olds is really close to 100%. And we also serve 3-year-olds with special education needs. We have an incredibly awarded Parents as Teachers program. They have their own pre-K program for 3-year-olds who don't qualify for services that meets 1 day a week. And it gets the caregiver and the child ready to send their child to school the next year. So this year, I'm not teaching because as National Teacher of the Year, I'm on sabbatical and I spend the year speaking and advocating on behalf of students and teachers. So to say that I'm missing the classroom would be an understatement, which is why I included some pictures here. You might not know this, but I teach a preschool program that is housed typically inside of a nursing home. And that's what I wanted to show you a couple of pictures from there, and I'll show you a video about that later. But it's bittersweet to be gone because I get to do things like connect with you, which I normally wouldn't get to do in a regular school year. But one of the things I miss most is the hilarious things that my students say. And I love to tell this story because it makes me laugh every time. So I teach a full day of pre-K, which means we have a short nap and rest time, which is my plan time, which is sacred to teachers. So I need those kids to rest. So I pull out all the stops to get them to rest. And one student asked me to sing to him. And so I said, okay. And I began to sing when he stopped me and he said, oh, never mind. I'm already asleep. So I guess he did not appreciate the years of show choir that I did in high school, contributing to my singing voice there at that time. But that student, while he was so hilarious, he was also one of the most challenging students that I've ever had in class. He was the kind of kid that comes to you so dysregulated that at the end of the day, you're in tears because you're wondering what else you can do to help. And when I looked at him, I often thought about someone else very close to me and the struggles that she faced as a child. And that was my big sister. So my home life as a child was loud and it was chaotic and it was full of emotional turmoil. But by all appearances, we were just a typical middle-class family. But there were some undiagnosed mental health issues and lots of verbal aggression between my caregivers, going on behind closed doors. And I love my parents. I don't blame them for what happened then. I truly believe that they were doing their best that they knew how to do. But I think that we often mistake some semblance of financial stability to mean homes without childhood trauma. But I know through experience that that's not the case. My older sister, who my challenging student reminded me so much of, was a really troubled little girl. Her behavior didn't really get aggressive until she became an adult, but as a kid, she was anxious and she was hypervigilant. She got overwhelmed frequently, and she had lots of learning issues. The issues that got addressed for her in school were the academic shortcomings. And at home, she was punished for those, as well as her emotional struggles, and just made to feel bad for those struggles in general. So those behaviors as a kid turned into a teenager who did things like lie and steal and run away and buck authority. And she did end up getting pregnant right after she turned 18. In her adulthood, she went on to become an addict, and she's been in and out of jail, and she's jumped from abusive partner to abusive partner, and sometimes lives out of her car. I rarely hear from her. But even sitting here right now, I feel bad that I wasn't able to save her from the reality that so many of our students face. And I've spent a lot of my own adult life just racked with guilt, wondering what was different about me. Why did I deserve to escape those destructive patterns that she didn't? How could I take that on for her? Why couldn't I help her? But I realized that it wasn't me who failed my sister, and it wasn't really the blame of one person. It was the result of holes in the system that was based on rewards and punishment and these band-aid solutions to really adaptive challenges. My parents were overwhelmed, the school was overwhelmed, and no one had the skills that they needed to help my sister. So I like to imagine a really different outcome for her. Like, what if my sister had a supportive emotional experience early on in life? I don't want what happened to her to happen to any other child. So I'm a career preschool teacher, but I know that my life has been leading me to advocate for the power of social emotional learning too at all ages. So people might hear the word social emotional learning and think it's just a buzz phrase, but I am here to tell you that it is so much more. It's about giving people the strength and the skills they need to cope with the ups and downs of life right now. This is one reason early childhood is so important. Our brains are developing most rapidly between the ages of 0 and 5, but they don't stop developing there. They're not fully developed until around the age of 24. I like to joke that the first couple of years of teaching for me, my brain wasn't fully developed. So all of those mistakes I made then were okay. So we have to address the social emotional needs of our students just as intentionally as we address their academic needs. I recently read a book, and it's called Born for Love by Maya Salzovitz and Dr. Bruce Perry. The book talks about the power of empathy, like what it is and how it's formed, why it's important, and how it's threatened in our modern world. The authors say, the gifts of our biology are a potential, not a guarantee. Empathy is not born into us. It's conditioned, it's learned. From the earliest moments of our lives, we're building mirror neurons with our every face and sound we copy. We're learning to be in tune with others. And though the authors specifically highlight empathy in this book, I think it's the same for most social emotional skills. We don't innately know how to get along with our peers and solve problems. What we innately know how to do is survive. And sometimes that's needlessly at the expense of other people. So many of the patterns created in our brains are created at a young age, like with my sisters. And then our behavior after that draws on those patterns, often sending people into a circle of lifetime trauma. And so I like to think about patterns in this way, like rules. So if I say 5, 4, 3, 2, you might fill that in with 1 automatically because you learned that and you know that to be true. It's a pattern. Our experiences in childhood also shape the patterns our brains develop. We carry those patterns with us, even the negative ones. But there are ways to rewire our brains, and it takes work. And educators are helping change these patterns into positive ones. If you look up the statistics of childhood trauma in our country, you might be surprised. I looked up ACEs in our country. And if you've heard of ACEs, it's adverse childhood experiences. And it consists of things like economic hardship, parental divorce or separation, living with someone who had an alcohol or drug problem. And the list sort of goes on. Parents serving jail time, domestic violence witness, death of a parent. In our country, the rate of children 0 to 17 who experience 2 or more of these indicators of these ACEs is 20.5%. I think that is 20.5% too many. And this is only the ones reported and only the ones who are suffering from 2 or more. We can't possibly tackle all of these setbacks with school alone and after the child turns 5. Trauma, hardships, and lack of resources affect large populations of families in the US. And only 34% of 4-year-olds in the United States receive free preschool. That's 1.5 million students, give or take. And that sounds like a lot, but we have 5 million 4-year-olds in our country. So that leaves 3.5 students who are potentially underserved. Some states move ahead, while other states leave children without access. Some 4-year-olds might have the family resources to be involved in a private program, but millions of children go without any early childhood experience at all, which furthers the education gap and furthers the likelihood of academic and social struggles later in their lives. There are 3.5 million kids who we may not be reaching. We need early childhood programs. We need to equip our families and students with skills and connections that will become the armor they need to thrive. So I mentioned before that my classroom is housed inside of a nursing home and retirement village, and this came about through our Early Childhood Readiness Coalition in Kansas, Winfield, which identified the need for more full-day pre-K opportunities in our community. So you might have heard of the Kansans Can Redesign Project, which is an initiative in our state. We recognize that the education model we were operating within was largely based on the Henry Ford factory model, and we were serving old needs in a new world with new problems. So through this way of thinking, our community partnership formed with Cumbernauld Village, the nursing home where my class is housed. And I could give an entire speech on that partnership, but the highlights are that we're serving both populations, my students and the elderly residents. And I'm going to show you a video that shows you how powerful those connections and that social emotional focus is. Oops. Sorry, guys. I tried to enlarge it and I went forward.
My name is Jesse Hatfield. They call me Grandpa Jess. I'll be 91 years old next week. Greet the children every morning when they come in at 8:15. And it's a very, very wonderful feeling. It's just a real neat experience.
I'll say hi to all the little kids that are going to see this. My name is Cecil Thompson. This year I'll be 94 years old. I've been here 5 years, and I was sure glad when they started bringing these young children in so we could be with them. I enjoy them. I get to see them every day. I meet them when they come in. I'm the great-grandfather for 2 great-grandkids, but they live in Chicago. I don't get to see them, but I see these kids here every day.
Well, my name is Betty Long, and I'm a grandma to the kids. I enjoy coming down and reading to them on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and usually on Tuesday and Thursdays I come down and play with them. And they're just very enthusiastic, very, very loving.
My name is Ed Foster. I've been here at Cumbernauld about 3.5 years. I'm a former teacher in public schools and at Southwestern College in Winfield. And I've had experience from the kindergarten through college, but I've never been more challenged than I have been with the little VIKES. They're tough, but are they sweet?
What do you think, Roger? What do you like to do with the kids?
With the kids?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just like to be around them and interact with them.
next question has to do with what it has done and its impact on my own life. I have to tell you that until you're 90 years old, you really don't know how you're going to feel. But I felt several years ago like I had already done anything I could possibly do. I'm almost ready to say that I gave up on an awful lot of my interests, my activities. And I have a little trouble expressing this, but I wake up in the morning so totally different than I did just a year ago. I have a reason for getting up. I have sung all my life, but I've never had the feedback that I get for singing for these kids. Now I see little 4-year-old kids responding in a way that I have never received before.
Ed, do you want to tell the story about what a kid asked you
Oh, yes.
about the war?
You know, I always ask the children, do you have any questions you'd like to ask me? And yes, they do. And sometimes they kind of get off track. But I was kind of taken aback by this question. I said, I was on a battleship in the Navy in World War II. And they said, were you killed in the war? And I said, I don't think so, I'm here. So there are questions like that, and when they're asking, you never know what they're going to ask, but they're so cute, and they're so serious. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I accidentally stopped sharing my screen. Sorry about that. You can see definitely the impact that our partnership with Cumbernauld Village and our preschool is making, not only on the lives of my students, but the lives of the seniors who live there at Cumbernauld. You know, I told you a sad story about my sister, but now I want to tell you a happy story about this partnership and this early childhood experience for one of my students. So I had a student in the last couple of years who I'll call Sarah for this story. Sarah also struggled with emotional regulation and communicating her needs. She was very sensitive and extremely hurt by small transgressions of her peers. She sometimes yelled at teachers and staff and frequently lost control of her emotions, often didn't want to come to school, and sobbed for long periods of time. But when we would leave our classroom to interact with some of the more fragile residents, Sarah's pouty demeanor would change. She would use gentle touches and smiles, and she loved to hear their stories. She would often report back to me things like, "Did you know Grandma Sue used to ring the bell at her schoolhouse when recess was over?" I could see that the more positive connections she was having with these incredible adults, the more that her skills with her peers blossomed. So I gathered this anecdotal data, but there was this feeling inside of me that wanted to put some numbers to this. So I did a little experiment and I kept track of how many positive interactions Sarah was getting each day. So I'm an early childhood special education teacher and I love data, which is why I did this. So I followed her around with my little clicker through the day and I counted how many positive interactions she got, which include things like high fives and conversations and smiles and hugs and any positive reinforcement from the adults in our building, whether that be volunteers or classroom staff. Oh, let me see why this isn't moving. Hold on. So it was 53. She got 53 positive interactions with supportive adults in one day. So if an average school year is 180 days, that would mean she gets around 10,000 positive interactions in 1 year of preschool because of this early childhood partnership. And that takes my breath away. I know that willingness comes from connection. Well-connected kids feel safe and loved, and they're able to access learning centers of their brains. I know this just viscerally, and I know this as a professional. I know this from my experience both in and out of the classroom. Kids from all types of homes and all types of situations are in need of this connection. My sister needed it, the little boy who couldn't sleep without my singing needed it, and all students need it. Not only did my student blossom socially, all of my class, the year that she was there, at the end of the year, I had 100% of my students on grade level or above in the area of phonemic awareness. In my decade of teaching, that has never happened. We shoot for 80%. But the thing is, I wasn't doing anything different with my teaching. It was coming from the connection and the opportunities that they had to engage with a literacy-rich environment with more supportive adults. So I know that there is power in connecting with kids and promoting those social emotional skills. So I would be so remiss if I did not take this chance as National Teacher of the Year to advocate for the vast field of early childhood ed and to celebrate what it does for those who get the chance to participate. So you've heard my sister's story, you've heard Sarah's story, and now I want to tell you what you guys can do to help shape the story of early childhood education. So what you can do is to bring early childhood voices to the table. There's a really powerful narrative about who teaches young children, and part of that narrative is the expectation of, compliance. As an early childhood educator, I'm active in lots of different organizations, state and local, like the NEA. So when I go to regional and state events and I introduce myself, people are really surprised to hear that I teach preschool. I'm nearly always the only preschool teacher in the room and one of very few elementary teachers in the room. So there's this unfair idea that preschool teachers don't have the interest or the ability to be involved in the workings of professional leadership organizations. People might assume that because we teach young children that we might not be invested in the whole system, or that because we spend our days talking to little people that we can't hold our own in tough situations. But early childhood educators are some of the most highly educated, in tune, and intelligent people that I know. I understood how important this representation was, being at the table, when I was the first preschool teacher in my district to join the executive team of NEA. And we've been offering free public preschool for nearly 20 years. I took data over a year with one of my colleagues to show that our early learning center teachers needed additional plan time because of their heavy special education workload. But it had been nearly 2 decades of uncompensated work on the part of the other preschool teachers before we were able to negotiate some additional plan time. When we discussed it as a group, many of my coworkers thought that nobody would listen to us, or it was a fight that we wouldn't overcome. So that old expectation of compliance had trickled down, and it was showing its face. Someone on the admin team said, wow, we never knew this was happening. And that's because we weren't represented before. We hadn't been invited, we weren't speaking up, and nobody was asking what we needed. It's not enough to just fund a pre-K program. And this applies to many underrepresented populations in our schools and our communities. So if you're in a leadership position right now, you have the responsibility to engage those unusual voices in the process. I'd also love to see more people advocating for universal pre-K. The United States is one of the few countries that doesn't have a unified early childhood education system, and this sets us back from other countries early on. Because of things like ESSA and accountability programs, we really start monitoring outcomes in grade 3, but we're missing so many opportunities before that. It's up to us to educate our communities and our policymakers and our local school boards about the critical role of early childhood education and its outcomes for the rest of the child's life. And also, I ask that you coordinate existing funding sources. One of the questions that I get a lot from people is, how do we fund this? Someone asked me recently, what do we deprioritize in order to prioritize early childhood education? And I say, you don't have to deprioritize anything. Unfortunately, a lot of pre-K funding is like a patchwork quilt right now. You just need someone to do the work of putting it together. Funding sources already exist. From Head Start to at-risk dollars to the Child Care Block Grant, there are options to take advantage of while we advocate for the same type of funding that K-12 receives. My dream is that one day we won't need to rely on grants to fund our early childhood experiences, but there are some incredible organizations with money to help. Missouri is a great state to look to for advice on this, along with Alabama, Wyoming, Ohio, Mississippi, Tennessee. And I'm sure that there's a lot more, but we just have to invest the time and the effort. And that's exactly what a focus on early childhood is. It's an investment. One of my favorite quotes that I have hanging in my classroom as a gift from a student says, "From tiny seeds grow mighty trees." Early childhood education is the beginning of work with families. It's the beginning of the classroom experience. It nourishes the tiny seeds and it builds strong roots that continue to contribute to the health of the tree for years to come. Before I leave you today, I'm going to encourage you to do something that's not on my slides. So it's no secret that teachers are struggling right now. Teaching in person comes with incredible risk and a million responsibilities. Teaching remotely challenges families, teachers, and students in ways that a lot of people can't overcome. And teaching in a hybrid model seems to be the worst of both worlds. So this image keeps coming to my mind, and I spoke about it to my state board last week, of trying to stuff a tent back into its original bag. If you're a camper, you know this feeling. It's just, it never will quite go in. I get a very similar feeling when I witness what we're trying to replicate for our learners this year. It's just never going to quite be the same, and I think that's okay while we're going through this pandemic. In the spring, we were so kind and full of grace for educators, but the challenges of this pandemic did not go away, and we are back to expecting the same results in a very different, challenging time. I think we need to relax some of our expectations from the top down, whether that be looking at required seat time hours or some of our other initiatives. Beautiful learning can still take place, but we've got to quit trying to put the tent back in that same bag. We need to make it a little easier for ourselves because we're juggling things we wouldn't normally be juggling in a typical school year. So your decisions on these matters can help or hurt our communities. So I'm just asking that you re-examine what's necessary as you look at the workload that's on everyone's plates in this really still scary situation. Keep the learning going, absolutely. But just remember what's been added to everyone's plate as you look at what you can take away. I want to thank you so much for having me here today. It was my honor to be your guest. I would love to continue to connect with you on social media. Here's my contact info. I know that it might also be on the Whova app as well. You can really just search my name on any of the platforms and you will probably find me. But thank you again for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, Tabitha, for helping us keeping the learning going. That's what you encouraged us to do for children. That's what you've helped us to do today, is keeping the learning going. And I know we're supposed to open to questions, but I tell you, you've said so much that that has resonated with me that I'm not so sure I'm going to let anybody else in on this conversation. So couple things. First of all, my first teaching job was in Winfield.
Really?
Winfield, West Virginia.
Oh.
Anyway. And we also worked on establishing one of the very first universal preschool programs where you could walk into a classroom. So we started about 30 years ago. You walk into a classroom and have 15 kids. 3 of them might be Head Start. 4 of them might be private. Some of them were public school funded, but no one knew the difference. It
Right.
makes a world of difference.
Mhm.
And there are some good success stories. You hear states ask all the time, how can we get this done? It can be done when there's a will. And I think the Kansas story and the story such as the one I was telling, it can be done. So thank you for being that champion. Thank you for being on the national stage telling that story, because it is a story that needs to be told. I'm hoping those of you that are in the audience have made a lot of connections with what Tabitha just said with our sessions from yesterday. If you think about that lead-off conversation we had about equity, there are so many parallels here and so many things here that tie to that equity conversation. And I'm just hoping in your mind you're making those connections. And I may go into the platform here and start a discussion about that here after a while, because I'd love to hear some of your conversations. And also, you mentioned the Kansas CAN program. We at NASBE have written about that, about the Kansas CAN program, because at the time, your state board chair, Jim McNeese, was also, on our executive team, so executive board team. So we were very familiar, and I think if you look in the chat box that we have just posted that piece, that our editorial director went over and reposted it. So a lot of familiar connections here, Tabitha. Thank you so much. Okay, now I'm going to give someone else a turn to talk. And we've reserved the right for the very first question and comment to come from one of your colleagues, the current chair of the Kansas State Board of Education, Kathy Bush. So Kathy, as the chair of your state board, I'm sure you're extremely proud of Tabitha, and we just welcome you to provide a few comments and ask her the first question.
Oh, I'd be delighted. And Tabitha, hello. It's great. On behalf of the Kansas State Board of Education, we are all so proud of you and the job you're continuing to do. And, you know, the connection with the early childhood education, as you know, that's one of our goal areas now for the state board. So what you're doing is so important. So we're really thrilled with what you're doing. And we appreciate all your hard work and how well you're representing us. So that's a great thing. My question kind of goes a little bit, you've talked a little bit about a couple things. First of all, you gave us some charges for early childhood education. And then you talked about during this pandemic that we're in right now and the issues that we're dealing with and how, you know, kind of hard to put the tent back in the bag. Yeah. That certainly resonates, you know, it's really hard and, you know, what can we do? I'm going to stretch this out a little further and even ask you to think about on out there. So think about, because we are doing a lot of things differently now because we have to. Well, you mentioned online learning, our remote learning, you mentioned hybrid learning, and you mentioned even in the classroom right now, it looks differently. So as we look into the future and we look about, you know, we talk about redesign in Kansas, I'm sure other states are doing some similar things. As we look out into the future, can you think of some of the things that we are learning right now through this pandemic that will help us reimagine and redesign and rethink about how we're doing our schooling in the future? So that's my question to you, Tabitha.
So yes, you know, I think it's really hard for us to think very long term right now because we are surviving this pandemic. But I would, you know, encourage us to keep our eye on the future too, and think about what are our learners going to need when we return to traditional schooling. I think this pandemic has really highlighted a lot of the inequities in our homes. And one of the things I really want people to think about as educators and as school systems is to reflect on what our purpose is now, right? It is no longer just academic support. We're realizing that we need to support families more wholly and fully than we have been in the past. And you know, public school was founded on bridging gaps of inequity to create more equitable communities. And I think we sort of need to reflect on that as we move forward. I've been saying this pretty publicly that, you know, kind of one of those scariest things I heard once that you can say is we've always done it this way. And I think that we can't be scared of doing things a little bit differently and focusing on what our community's needs really are. I think we really learn from the past, but as educators, we have to serve the future. And so we need to think, what is going to be best for our kids coming up? And I think that focus on social emotional skills and family support. What can you put in place? We know we need family support in the pandemic, but we also know we're going to need it continuing on because our kids are still struggling with some of these same inequities, even when we're face to face.
Thank you, Tabitha. I appreciate it. And I know other people have questions for you also.
All right.
And if you have not done so and have a question for Tabitha, please use your the Q&A box in on the Who app. We do have some questions coming in, Tabitha, and I'm going to combine two of them into one question here because they both start the same way. They say, "What advice do you have for?" You know, you're an expert now. So anyway, the two combined is first one was, what advice do you give teachers struggling with remote learning that they're struggling? And then secondly, what advice would you give for struggling first-year teachers? And both of these questions come from board members in Nebraska.
So for those struggling with remote learning, I would say, do not be afraid to talk to your principal, to your board about your workload. You know, a lot of people look at, you know, admin as the other. And, you know, one thing about me that I think has helped me to be a little more successful in my life is just not being afraid to speak up. You guys are the authority as educators on what happens in your classrooms. And your principals, your board of education, you all have the same goals. You want to see kids succeed and they want to support teachers and staff. So you just need to speak up and say, what's too much? Like, what is not helping my kids right now? And be able to advocate for that, because your voice has power. I think that educators are really going to be heroes in this pandemic. And so we've got to show up and we've got to speak up. Now, with a first year teacher, my advice always is to take the help that people are offering you. When I was a first year teacher, I was so proud. I thought, I'm going to be able to do this on my own. I just graduated. I know everything I need to know. I didn't want to admit that I needed help, but there were so many people there with, hundreds of years of combined experience ready to help me. Lean on them. We really do, as seasoned educators, want to help you. We don't always know what to do, but if you have a really specific ask, again, don't be afraid, because that spirit of community is one that most teachers present to their new educators.
Great advice. Now I want to ask you some questions about teacher preparation. State boards of education across the country have varying degrees of authority from state to state. There are no two states that have the same, but almost every state owns either the licensure program where they license teachers to teach, or in conjunction with, they approve the preparation programs at universities. They have to approve their program, they have to approve their curriculum in order for a teacher to get a license. So I'm going to ask you a twofold question about that. You have a captive audience now. These are the people who own these policies. They help license and prepare teachers, the programs. Can you tell us from your teacher preparation program, what were some of the crucial pieces that helped you be successful? But if you could redesign, or if you could change teacher preparation programs, or something that you would want to add to that or change in some way, what's missing? Give some advice to these state board members who kind of own that in their wheelhouse.
So this is absolutely my dream to work with. I've been teaching adjunct at Southwestern College, and it is my dream to work on curriculum and work on teacher prep programs, because there's so much I wish I'd known when I went into school. And I had a great teacher prep program at Southwestern College. I loved it. But I think that I wasn't quite ready for the amount of trauma and social emotional training that I needed. And so many schools are catching on and are trying to prepare more. But I had one class on classroom management my entire education career. And most of what I do is classroom management. That is the most crucial piece. Before learning can even happen, you have to get that. You have to be responsive to your children's social and emotional needs. And so I would say, make that a part of every class. I have a friend who teaches in a private Catholic school, and I think I've mentioned this to someone before, and she has to make religion a part of every subject, right? And I think that we need to do the same thing with social emotional learning and supporting kids' self-regulation, interpersonal skills, how to interact with their peers. These are all really crucial things that we need to be teaching students in every grade level. So we need some more intentional classes. My vote would be at least one per semester, and then also integrated into every content area class.
Lost my mouse there for a minute. Couldn't find the mute button. I have three screens. My mouse kind of goes slow. We had someone, Maureen Nichols from Nebraska, offered her congratulations for this extraordinary opportunity. And she says, due to the pandemic, you've not been able to experience what other past teachers of years have experienced in their year, with the many of activities and opportunities to bring all together. Have you been able to connect and network with the other teachers of the year? Because typically that's a big part of it, a lot of gatherings and whatnot. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So CCSSO, our sponsoring organization, Council of Chief School State Officers, has been really intentional about keeping us connected with virtual opportunities. And we also have our own group me chat. We have our own Facebook group. We are in communication nearly every day from the teachers of the year around the country. And that has been an incredible blessing to me. We so want to be together in person, because all of us are educators in the truest sense. Like, we get energy from being with other people and interacting with them. But we're also, concerned about safety, and that's the most important thing right now. But we have definitely stayed connected, and honestly, I'm probably talking to them more than I would because it's virtual. but CCSSO has also committed to 2 more in-person events for us next year. So we're still hoping that when it's safe to get to be together again.
With state boards of education, we often talk about the teacher pipeline, that, growing your own pipeline from the recruitment, preparation, and licensing and get them into the classroom. And many times then we just wash our hands and walk away and say, there they are, go forth and do well. So 2 things that state boards are increasingly dealing with is the retention of teachers in the classroom and mentoring them along the way in the classroom. And so many districts and so many schools fail at that piece of it. And I think it's because they have just so many other things to do. They don't really have time to focus on that. But if you had some thoughts on how better to mentor new teachers coming into the classroom and how to retain classrooms. We have several states right now that are really struggling with a mass exodus because of the pandemic. Teachers that were nearing retirement, and they say, we really just can't handle the online learning. We don't want to. So we have more of a need now than ever. So a little bit about mentoring and retention. So any thoughts there?
I do. I went through a mentoring program actually twice because I was still within my first 5 years teaching when I moved. And I had an incredible experience, but part of that was because I was mentored by another classroom teacher. And one thing that was really wonderful that I got to do was my district provided a sub for me on some days, and I got to go watch that other teacher teach. That was a huge piece. So we weren't just trying to meet in the 15 minutes at lunch or 20 minutes after school. We didn't, have the same plan time. And so my district was really supportive in allowing me to watch other people in action. And that is something that I think we're missing. We student teach, and it's usually in a really different place than we end up teaching. School culture is different. And, we maybe have a week or 2 of training before school starts, but you need to watch what other people are doing who are successful. And I loved that. A lot of our mentor teachers have changed now in my district and have become more like instructional coaches who do a great job. But there's something to be said for being able to watch another teacher who's going through the same thing you are right now, like on your grade level or in your content area, and being able to watch the art of how they teach. And so that would be my suggestion, is providing some professional development time for teachers to get out of their classroom so they're not trying to juggle everything in their class while they watch another teacher teach. But I also, I talk a lot about school culture and how important that is, and that really it starts with the principal, and but everybody has a responsibility in there. So the more that we can focus on positivity and this collective efficacy, like everybody wanting to see everything succeed, getting people on that page, that's so important. So those are the 2 efforts that I would most recommend.
Great advice. And how long the program that you're currently working with and what you just shared with us during the video, how long has your center been in the senior center?
For 2 years. And so this year we're back at our regular early learning building where all of our preschools are housed because of the pandemic. But yeah, for 2 years.
Well, I am post Medicare age, so I've been thinking, what's into my future? I hope that's in my future. That would make it a whole lot better if that's all that coming in my future. So let me ask you this: before your center was located where it is, and you had this wonderfully unique situation, what efforts did you do to build a connection to community? And how can are there any policies in place that either prevented you from doing that or helped you do that? But talk to us about connecting your classroom to the community without having that wonderful, unique experience you had.
So community and family connections have been always something that I'm super excited about. Even if we didn't have a school-wide initiative, I look at what my personal network is, right? Not only people that I know, but people that maybe went to the same college as me, people that are in similar organizations. A really big thing for me was to get involved in my own community, to be able to make those connections, because it's really hard to just reach out and ask people favors. But when I started doing things like Save Our Schools Cali County, which is like a grassroots organization, an anti-poverty coalition, Circles USA in my town, I was suddenly connected to more people who had the same interest as, having a healthy, vibrant community. And then I was able to make asks of those people and to have that network. And so one big thing that I really like to do is once a month, we're going to do some kind of community outreach in my class, whether that mean we're walking around our neighborhood and picking up trash, posting about it on social media. Maybe we're doing something like a canned food drive or making treats for the Humane Society. It was really important to me that I create these prolonged connections, right? Because kids are only in my class for 1 year. So I need the community. They really are that armor for kids when they move past education. And so I always wanted my kids to understand that they were super vital and important members, even at 4 years old.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Well, we really appreciate your time with us today. I think I'm going to have time just for one more question,
Okay.
and then we'll wrap it up. But the question was, what has been your most amazing experience as Teacher of the Year and National Teacher of the Year so far? And I hope the answer is being at the NASBE conference. I mean, naturally, I think that's the right answer, is that you're at the NASBE conference. But anyway, putting that aside, this conference today, what has been your most amazing experience thus far?
I think my most amazing experience has just been, a culmination of all of them, this like exposure and access to audiences that I didn't have before. You follow me on social media for 10 years, I've been saying the same stuff, right? I've really tried to use that as a platform for education and for kids. And now I get the audience with great people like you guys. I get to share the stage with people like Joe Biden and Ibram Kendi. Like, that just blows my mind that I would even be considered amongst the likes of people, so wonderful and great, that I would get this opportunity. And so I'm just really thankful for the opportunity to be celebrated, and to also remember that I'm sort of just a conduit for this, right? Like, I've been elevated this year, but the work I do is for everybody that stands with me.
Well, that's such a great message to end on today. And it was my privilege for several years to sit on the committee that chose the Teacher of the Year. And NASBE still does have a slot, but my time doesn't allow me now to do that. And so Megan Blanco on our staff sits on that committee of choosing. And I was always, people said, oh, it's a popularity contest or whatnot. I'm so thrilled that I can say that what you just said, that the National Teacher of the Year program elevates someone who has done this work for years, continues to do it, and is an example of what's happening in thousands of classrooms across the country. So thank you for being that stellar example for us. Thank you for representing and standing in for all those tens of thousands of teachers that you're representing. And I'm just particularly thrilled that we have an early learning person in that position. And so with that, thank you so much for your time today. You've just been a delight to have, and we wish you well, and keep your family safe during this unusual time. And hopefully that we'll be able to see you in person at some point when we're able to, we can get this pandemic. We get to see you in person. So Tabitha, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.